Welcome to What Shall We Say to These Things?
I'm TJ,
And I'm MJ.
and this is your low-key ghetto Bible study.
Yes.
So this week we are getting into Esther Chapter 6. So if you have not seen or listened to any of our other reviews and recaps, we invite you to check out the introduction to Esther audio first.
Right.
We set the background for the whole book, and then take a listen to the other chapters, what we've learned
And covered so far.
It makes what we talk about today make a little bit more sense.
Right.
It sets the tone and all that good stuff. So at this point, we invite you to pause the video and pray before we get into it.
Okay, let's get started. So what we usually do is TJ will give us a summary, a review of what happened in the chapter in sections, and then we go through the sections and we look at what stood out to us.
And then when we're done with that, we will talk about what did we discover about God, or what were we reminded about God in the chapter, and then we'll look at what is the life application. What can we apply to our lives, because we believe that Bible study should be about transformation.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get into it. And chapter 6 starts on the very same day as chapter 5 takes place. Well, it's the nighttime.
Right.
All right, so we start with the king not being able to sleep. And his solution to his insomnia was to get one of his what would you call it? I don't know if it was necessarily a scribe, but just gets one of his servants to come in and read the records. And I think I saw in one version that they were reading the records for his entire reign.
Oh, okay.
So that was interesting to me. And
But he's a relatively new king.
no, but listen to this, right? Like, should we talk about this at this point?
Okay, let's go on. Let's finish the review.
It comes to a point where the servant is reading about Mordecai, finding out about the assassination plot, and the king then asks, "What was done to honor this man, Mordecai?" And the servant tells him nothing was done. And so the king says, "Who is currently in the court?" And the servant looks out and says, "Haman is currently in the court." So that was verses 1 to 5.
Okay.
Right? Now, you made the point about him being a relatively new king, right? Which was true, because we're talking about, at this point, I think we're talking about 7 years of reign, give or take.
Okay.
Right? Maybe a bit more.
I feel like it's been more, because where was he when he Esther became queen?
That's true. I think it was about year 7.
So I think he's about 12 years.
So maybe it's about 12 years. That's true. But the fact is, right, if they're reading for his entire reign, from the beginning to whatever point, the fact is that they got to the point of Mordecai. That is what had me mind blown.
You still expect, because if they're recording things happening every day, like that's a lot of days. Okay,
so I was wondering if it's a case where they started from the beginning, or if it was just they kept a bookmark every time you try to sleep. This is we put the bookmark here. This is where we left off last time. Right. Now, as you said that, right, one of the first things that struck me is that I had never thought about the fact that this was taking place on the very same night. Right? Okay. So I had just assumed, okay, maybe the king is like me and he's just an insomniac, right? But then it occurred to me that he's a king. This is a stressful job. Maybe it's not that he's a full-time insomniac. Maybe it's just a very, very stressful point in his reign, and there's a lot on his mind, and he can't sleep.
Ruling 127 provinces would be stressful. Yes. A lot to think about. Yeah.
But like my third idea about why he couldn't sleep kind of took me by surprise, because I had never considered this before. But imagine, right, that your wife, well, okay, let's make it generic. Your spouse, right, risk their life to come to see you, right? Whatever the means may be, but they will refuse to tell you why they came to see you. Okay. That would keep me up. I would not be able to sleep. Like, okay, I want to believe, like, for me, that right now has the heaviest weight of possibly why he was
still
up.
up.
Yeah, why he could not sleep. And I think it's interesting that they specific and they saying, I think all of the versions I read was saying that same night.
Okay.
Right? He couldn't sleep. The very same night of the banquet, King Xerxes could not sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, for me, the fact that his wife risked her life to come see him and is not telling him why.
Mm-hmm.
That's reason to keep him up.
Yeah.
In my books.
That makes sense. Definitely.
And what was interesting for me when we go forward to the fact that they come to the fact that Mordecai discovered the assassination plot, reveals it, is that the king asks what was done for Mordecai. He makes the assumption that after such I guess maybe heroic act of service, that something had to have been done for Mordecai. And so I think he may have been a bit alarmed that the person who pretty much saved his life was not rewarded anyway. Like nothing was done.
Because okay, you go ahead.
It's like that just makes me a little suspicious as to why he was not rewarded. Like who would have been responsible for making sure that he got his kudos, his dues for saving the king's life? Like who would have been in charge? Because to me that's a big deal.
I'm thinking about it because not only that you want to reward the people who save your life, if these people are not necessarily, if they could be suspicious. So let's say Mordecai was doing it for the reward, not just to do something right, and he doesn't get rewarded. That could mean an immediate switch.
I hadn't even considered that.
He has no more alliance, and he could be the next person plotting to kill the king.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. So I feel like that could have him even more alarmed. That, and I went back after I read that. I went back this week to find out when the time frame around when Mordecai would have think, and it should be about 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. So because I think it's after Esther's newly appointed queen, because he gets the job at the gate around that time.
Right. So it's around 5 years. So that's a long time. I would be concerned too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I never looked at the time frame. I never considered the time frame. Yeah. So like this person saves your life. You have the means as the king to like give them a nice bag of money,
medal,
something,
or something like
a nice pin.
Yeah.
And you find out that, like you saying, 5 years later, nothing was done. I think that had me a little. I was honestly side-eyeing Haman. I was honestly side-eyeing
that sounds Haman. like he's
because as the king's right-hand man, second-hand man. I think he's right-hand man. I feel like he would have been in the position to be dishing out the rewards, and I might be stretching it a little bit, but I genuinely feel like that was his doing,
and it was intentional.
Yes, definitely.
Oh no, we forgot to reward Mordecai.
Okay, so I have one more point, but do you have anything?
Not for this section. Okay. All my stuff is
my last point is the fact that at whatever ungodly hour that this poor servant is up reading to the king, Haman is not in his bed either. Haman is also, he's not just not in his bed, right? He's in the king's court. Yeah. And like we find out why. We know why he's there, because the last chapter ended with them advising him to go get the king's permission to kill Mordecai. And I think that this goes again to show us, I think we talked about this in the last chapter, that he was so adamant about getting rid of this one man. Yeah. Like he would not wait until the designated day to kill the Jews. This one man had to go before that. Right. And so he's not even waiting until the sun comes up. Right? It's nighttime. He is there. He's there ready, so that the minute the king starts his day, Your Majesty, I am here. You understand? And so I think that was interesting to pick up about the fact that Haman was also not asleep that night. He was already waiting in the king's court. All right, so if you have nothing else to add, let's jump to the last part of the chapter. We're looking at verses 6 to 14. And I like this part for several reasons, but let me summarize it. Okay, so Haman comes to the king, and the king immediately asked him, what should the king do for a man that he wants to honor? And every version I read, because I went to check it, right? Every version I read says that Haman thinks to himself, who else would the king want to honor besides me, right? So, and based on that thought, he was like, okay, let a royal robe that the king has already worn, a coral crown, and that the king has also already worn, be put on this man, and let him be set on a horse that the king has already ridden, and let one of the king's princes escort him to the city, saying, this is what the king does to men or people he wants to honor. And then the king says, okay, great, I love that. Go get the robe, the crown, and the horse, and do exactly as you suggested for Mordecai, the Jew. And it's interesting that there's no refusal. It just tells us that Haman goes ahead and does that, and he carries Mordecai in the robe and the crown on the horse to the city, saying, this is what the king wants to do. This is what the king does to a man he wants to honor. And so when they are done making their round of the city, Mordecai goes back to work. He goes back to the city gate. But Haman covers his head and goes home grieving. And he goes home and tells his friends and his wife what happened. And their response to him is that if you have already begun to fall before Mordecai, who we have established is a Jew, you are not going to prevail over him. You will have your downfall before him. And the chapter ends by saying that while they were still having this conversation, the king's servants came to get Haman for the banquet.
Second night of the dinner, right?
I had lots of thoughts. I don't think I was able to put a lot of them into points that stood out to me, but I just like
there's a lot to unpack here.
Yes, yeah, it's a lot. Okay, so you go ahead.
Oh, this one, I like you said, I don't think I was able to organize it well, but let me try to start from the beginning. Okay, so I think throughout the book, we're seeing where Haman's, I guess, priorities lie.
Mm-hmm.
He is concerned with self. He's vain. He's proud. And this was just another indication. It was more evidence of that, because you think about, first of all, the king wants to honor somebody. He assumes it's himself, right? Who else? And I guess the story has not been about him, but we have not seen, like, I seriously don't know what Haman's job is. Like, I haven't seen that. I don't know why he would need honor.
There's no job description.
Right.
But I mean, besides being the king's right-hand man,
all I've seen is that Haman is his drinking buddy. That's all I've seen him do, right? And plot to kill the Jews. But anyway, the book isn't about him, so it's possible we don't know what he does. It's not that, it was just that it was not recorded, not that he doesn't do anything. But anyway, he first of all, he assumes, like, who else would the king want to honor? It's me, of course. But the reward he puts together, it gives me the impression that Haman cares most about what other people think, and it's not necessarily what the king thinks. It's what, those lowly everyday people. Well, to be fair, Susa is the palace city, so maybe they're not necessarily peasants, and they're nobility, and so he wants to be, I guess, raised and elevated in their eyes, and
more so than he already was.
Exactly, he's like the second in command, right? How much further can you be elevated? But that stood out to me, and the contrast between him and Mordecai. You have him, Mordecai being honored, and he just goes when it's over, he goes back to work, and he's just like, you get the impression that this was not a big deal for him. Okay, the king is honoring me, but let me get back to my job.
I work to bills to pay.
Exactly. So you get the impression that Mordecai is this humble man, and Haman is too concerned about his image and how other people see him.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? I feel like you have a point about this, so I wanted to bring it up then. But I also compare Haman and Esther. Here you have Esther waiting a night before she brings her request to the king. And Haman is like, nope, I'm going right away.
I had not even thought about that. That's interesting.
I'm going right away. I'm not even going to sleep. I'm going straight to the king.
That's interesting.
With my request.
Yeah, that's an interesting contrast, especially when hers. There was so much on the line with hers, and like he literally has nothing at risk here. That's interesting. I never considered that.
Oh, another thing is that Mordecai is when we were looking at previously, we were saying that Mordecai did the right thing, and it almost seems like he did it because it was the right thing and not necessarily for a reward.
Mm-hmm.
But there was still a reward, even though it was 5 years later. There was a reward, and so I think that's usually how life works. That even though, but I feel like this is applying to my life, but I think that's something we've experienced as children of our parents, that we hear a lot of people talking about what our parents did for them, and while they may not have received a reward, I think we have experienced a lot of the favor
and the benefits
that comes with our parents' actions. So I think even if we don't experience the reward in our lifetime, I think it trickles down to the future generations.
I like that. Yeah, and it's interesting because you talk about what our parents did, but then if you listen to our father, he talks about him benefiting from the goodwill of the actions of his mother.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's to the third and the fourth generation.
Right.
Okay, so I think my points were pretty similar to yours. I really thought like when I thought about Haman assuming that it had to be him the king wanted to honor, my words were the pride, the audacity. And for me, it was interesting that his vanity backfired. Because he could have just said, let the king send out a memo or a message to the 127 provinces saying this man is a great man and this man did this for me and I honor him. I'm grateful to him, etc., etc. Or he could have said, give him some money. But it was like you were saying, it was about how he himself wanted to be portrayed, and the way that backfired, because he saw himself. I'm sure he was already envisioning himself in the king's robe, and then he had to be the one holding the rein for the horse.
This is the only time in the whole book I feel bad for him. It's like that had to have been mortifying. This is the man you hate to the point that you want him dead today, right? And you carrying him around the square, shouting about him being honored by the king. I this is the only time I actually feel bad for him, but he kind of deserves it.
But my next point is that Haman took everything personally, right? And we see that as his thread woven throughout the story. So when he finds that Mordecai is not bowing, it's a threat against him. Like it's how dare you not honor me. When again after the first banquet he sees Mordecai not bowing, again it's how dare you not honor me. And now that he's had to honor Mordecai, it is woe is me. It's a tragedy for him. Like he just takes everything personally. And he could have just been like, okay, the king asked me to do this, no sweat.
But what I was thinking about reading that section is that low-key, Xerxes gives him a compliment. He told what Haman said was, have one of the king's noble princes or noble officials. Like the king low-key is calling him a noble official, right? I don't know how much more noble you can get than the king's right-hand man, but if he were looking more closely, he could have taken it as a compliment. Here I want you to walk alongside the man who saved my life. It could have been seen as a compliment if he was looking at it in the right
I think in a circumstance like that, the king himself might have wanted to walk with Mordecai. And
Okay.
he was just going under Haman's suggestion. I mean, I guess like for security reasons,
He couldn't.
he couldn't do that. And so he's like, the next best person is my right hand man. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. I think again we seeing Haman looking at things through very dark lenses and not being able to see any potential bright side.
Yeah, definitely.
What was my final point was that overnight the views of his circle changed. Because we end chapter 5 with them telling him, go to the king, build a gallows, go to the king, get permission to kill him, and then go enjoy yourself. And then at the end of by the next day, they're telling him your downfall in front of this man. And I think it's interesting because different versions said not different things necessarily, but the language kind of confused me because I was like, is it that they saying because he's a Jew, you will be
I was getting.
you will see your downfall before him, or is it you've begun to see your downfall in front of this man, the Jew, and so you will not prevail against him. But either way, in either statement, it looks like the fact that Mordecai was a Jew was significant.
Yeah.
And so they went from telling him go get permission to kill a man to you will not succeed against this man. You will have your downfall before him. It was just like they flipped the script on us.
I was like finding some good advice from them, but it's a little too late.
I don't like. Yes, it was too late, but I also feel like when we get into the rest of the story, we'll look at it. But yeah, and I think it's interesting that that because I feel like a statement like that had to be spirit led.
And it's so interesting. That's what confuses me, I guess. That these people who are capable of telling him, go kill this man, are also capable of telling him, like predicting the future, prophesying.
Mm. Which takes me into the what I learned about God, because it basically showed me that God is capable of using whoever He wants.
Wow. Yeah.
He's able to reveal Himself and His plan and potentially the future to whoever He wants. Like He will use whoever. But that was not my main one though. Do you have another one? In terms of what?
Well, this one is I guess twofold. It was the fact that God delivered Mordecai from death. But He didn't just do that, because He could have been like, He could have intervened so that Mordecai doesn't get hanged today, right? Mm-hmm. But he went as far as turning his hanging into like right. Yeah. So him being honored. He, like, in less than 24 hours, going from him being about to be hanged to him being honored. And that, I guess, I was excited about that until I guess internalized it outside of the story. If I take it out of the story, I cannot expect to be, but that comes into the personal. Just because I'm like, if we're looking at it based on his him being a Jew, just because I'm a child of God, doesn't mean that God is going to, I guess, intervene in my hanging for it to become honoring. Mm. In some cases, it's possible that I have to be hanged for him to be glorified. Mm. Which is not something I wanted to internalize. It's not something I wanted to hear. But like, if you're looking in terms of the rest of the Bible, you look at Jesus essentially, and it's not
the happy ending.
It's not the happy ending that the 3 Hebrew boys had. It's not the happy ending that Mordecai had. So
Daniel.
Right. These people being rescued right in the nick of time. I think I can hope for that, but I have to be able to be like the Hebrew boys and say, if he doesn't, I'm still okay. Yeah. So that was it was both what I learned about God and what I learned about how I should live my life. Yeah.
I think my major application, my major lesson about God ties into what you were just saying. It was that God can use the people and the circumstances that are trying to tear me down to lift me up.
Like literally.
Yeah. Okay. That was my okay God. Like you were saying, so sometimes it may look like, and I guess maybe I'm fortunate in this aspect, and I guess that like you, it ties into how I live my life, where I don't necessarily encounter people who are like actively trying to sabotage my life and destroy me and whatever. But I think sometimes there are circumstances that feel like that.
Yeah.
That like there's no hope. This is trying to ruin my life. But I think that this looking at this portion of this chapter on a whole was somewhat of an assurance that God has the ability to use that very same situation to lift me up. And it reminded me of Joseph. That what man intends for evil, God will turn it into good. That was my God lesson in this one. This was so cliche, but in terms of my life application, pride goes before a fall. So I must live humbly. Yes. I need to channel that inner Mordecai. Yes. And definitely, and be humble. Yeah. That was my first point. And then I don't remember what this was in reference to, right? I don't remember. Like I genuinely don't remember. But it's like even in uncomfortable situations, I can be aware that it might just be God using me. I think this was actually about Haman.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I think this was actually about Haman. And I think it ties back to the point you made about him not being able to see the bright side. And I think sometimes I might feel like Haman, where I am being forced to parade my enemies through the streets, literally or figuratively. But I think sometimes there could be situations that are uncomfortable that may even feel shameful, I guess. That I might want to grieve, do like Haman and cover my head and grieve and mourn and go home. But I need to be aware that even in those situations, in the discomfort of it, that it might just be God doing his thing.
Yeah, and it's not about you. It's not always about you. Yeah.
It ties back to Haman was taking everything personally. Yeah. So I need to not just take like everything. It's not about me. I can't take everything personally. So yeah, so that was my point. I think I started writing something else, but all I have is some. I don't know what I'm supposed to come out of that.
I feel like it's sometimes. Yeah.
In our lives.
Yeah. So I think we've covered everything.
I think so. That was Esther Chapter 6.
Yes.
And as usual, we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Our comments are open. Please share. What were your takeaways? What were the things that stood out to you from the lesson? What did you learn about God? What are you going to try and implement in your life? And
yeah, and I think we read the entirety of chapter 7 next time. Yeah. So you could read that ahead and start thinking about and praying about what it means to you, what stands out to you, what do you think God is trying to teach you about himself and about how you should live your life. And we will take a look at it next time.
Yep.
So this has been What Shall We Say to These Things?
I'm TJ.
And I'm MJ.
And until next time,
we're out.